You ever have one of those nights where you just know something's about to go sideways even before it happens? That was me standing in my kitchen barefoot at midnight listening to the world hold its breath. I knew something was wrong the second I heard that soft click from my back door. Not the wind, not some weird old house noise. It was that sharp, too smooth sound like when you close a car door slow, hoping nobody hears. Only thing was, I'd locked up everything myself. I always do, especially since Luna, my dog, started getting old and nervous at night. Luna started it, actually, this whole story. She's got that sixth sense, where her hackles go up before my brain's even caught on. There I was scrolling through weather apps on my phone half awake when Luna let out this low, guttural growl that made the hair on my arms stand up. She's not the bark for no reason type when she makes noise, it's because something's not right. That night her eyes were fixed on the dark hallway like she could see straight through the walls. So I grabbed my phone thumb on the flashlight, tried to steady my breath, heart pounding so loud I thought maybe whoever was out there could hear it too. And then right as I stepped into the hall, I caught the faintest whisper. Two voices, one sharp and hissed. "Did you lock it? Check again." That voice. Lord help me. I recognized that voice instantly. Karen Wilcox. If you've never met a Karen, count yourself lucky. Karen was the self-appointed queen of our street, president of the HOA, judge, jury, and executioner when it came to neighborhood standards. This is the same woman who once left a 5-paragraph note in my mailbox because my grass leaned disrespectfully toward her yard after a rain. That's a real quote, by the way. So you can imagine my shock when I peeked around the corner and there she was tiptoeing across my kitchen tiles like a raccoon in designer flip-flops, hair still perfect, flashlight in hand, eyes wild. But that wasn't the weirdest part. Trailing behind her sweaty face, flushed like he'd just run a mile in August, was her husband, Ralph. Good guy, a little hapless, not the type you'd expect to see committing a felony. Both of them, clutching little flashlights, were going through my kitchen drawers like it was some kind of deranged midnight scavenger hunt. First thought in my mind, are they actually robbing me? Second thought, Karen, the same Karen who measures mailbox heights for fun, is breaking into my house. It made no sense. But before I could wrap my head around it, Karen snatched up an envelope off my counter, the same one Sheriff Daniels had handed me that afternoon, with strict instructions. Keep this safe, don't open it, don't talk about it. I'll be back in the morning. Karen grabbed that envelope like she'd just found the golden ticket. This has to be it. Hurry, she whispered, eyes glittering. And that's when Luna barked one sharp protective warning that echoed through the kitchen. Karen froze mid-step. Ralph made a noise somewhere between a gasp and a whimper, and I stepped fully into the doorway. Flashlight pointed straight at them like some low-budget episode of Caught in the Act. Karen, I said, voice shaking but trying to sound tough. Why are you in my house? I wish I could tell you. She had a good answer, but whatever words she had ready were about to unravel into something so tangled, so ridiculous, it almost made sense. Before she could get a word out, Ralph lifted his hands and surrendered, voice trembling. There's more going on than you think, he whispered, eyes darting everywhere but my face. Karen shot him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. Shut up, Ralph! But he kept rambling about a mix-up, a secret something they had to fix before morning. And the strangest thing was, I believed him. Whatever was going on, it was bigger than two bored neighbors looking for trouble. Karen had that wild, frantic look she usually reserved for HOA meetings whenever someone dared to suggest pastel-colored mailboxes. She clutched the sheriff's envelope to her chest like it was a newborn, eyes, wild lips pressed thin. I took a step forward. Give me that. No, Karen barked, twisting away, face almost feral. You don't understand what's inside. We're trying to fix something that should have been handled months ago. I blinked, not sure whether to laugh or call 911. You broke into my house to fix paperwork, Ralph groaned, rubbing his forehead. Karen, please just tell them. They're going to find out anyway. That's when Karen spun on him like a cat whose tail just got stepped on. Ralph, stop talking. You always make things worse. And at that exact moment, Luna lunged not at Karen or Ralph, but straight at the back door, teeth bared at something or someone outside. Before anyone could react, a heavy knock rattled the frame. 3 sharp hits. Not the kind you get from a lost neighbor, official, practiced familiar. Sheriff's department called a voice I'd recognize anywhere. Karen went pale. Ralph looked like he might faint, and I suddenly realized I was standing in my own kitchen at midnight with 2 neighbors who looked suspiciously like they'd been caught stealing police evidence. I opened the door just a crack, and there stood Sheriff Daniels, boots dusty, jaw tight, looking like he'd been waiting for this exact moment all night. He stepped inside, eyes sweeping the kitchen, landing on Karen and Ralph with a sigh that sounded like he was tired of this whole town. "Ah," he said, voice bone dry, "figured I'd find you here." Karen tried to smile. It came out more like a nervous twitch. "Sheriff Daniels, we were just, checking on our neighbor, safety check. Community thing." He ignored her, turned to me. "Did they tell you why they're here?" I shook my head. Said something about fixing a mistake before morning. Ralph swallowed hard. "Sheriff, please let us explain before you—" "No." Sheriff Daniels held up a hand. "You're done explaining to each other. Get in the car. Now." But then he turned to me, and what he said next made my stomach drop. "You'd better come too. You're part of this whether you realize it or not." Karen groaned. Ralph muttered a prayer. And just like that, we all shuffled out into the night, climbing into the sheriff's truck like reluctant contestants in the world's weirdest reality show. The truck rumbled through the quiet neighborhood, headlights slicing across front lawns, mailboxes, all those tidy, silent houses pretending nothing strange ever happened here. Karen sat wedged between Ralph and me in the back seat, still gripping the envelope so tight her knuckles were white. Ralph stared straight ahead, lips moving in some silent, desperate plea. Sheriff Daniels just drove face stone serious, eyes fixed on the empty road. We turned down a gravel lane I'd never even noticed before, trees pressing close on both sides like they were keeping secrets. Finally, we stopped outside a squat cabin-style house. No lights, no porch swing, just the sheriff's truck and another car parked at an awkward angle. Sheriff Daniels muttered, "That's Deputy Mark's car," which means he's already inside. Karen inhaled sharply. "He can't be." "He wasn't supposed to." Karen, the sheriff, snapped, not another word. We climbed out gravel, crunching under our feet, and followed him inside. The house smelled like old coffee, cedar, and paper. There were stacks of files everywhere, the dining table buried under folders, a laptop glowing faintly in the corner. Somewhere deeper in the house, voices murmured low and tense. Sheriff Daniels motioned for us to stay put and vanished down the hall. But Karen, of course, immediately ignored him and tiptoed after, dragging Ralph with her. And I followed because apparently I'm still susceptible to peer pressure at my age. The sheriff pushed open a door at the end of the hallway. "Mark," he barked, "you better not be doing what I think you're doing." And there, bent over the desk, was Deputy Mark's shirt half untucked, looking more tired than any cop should ever look. But next to him was something nobody expected. Standing there, hands in his pockets, tall, blonde, and smirking, was a man I'd never seen before, but Karen sure had. She shrieked. Ralph gasped, and the sheriff cursed under his breath. "Karen," the man said, as cool as could be, "I told you we'd talk when the time was right." Karen's face turned the color of an overripe tomato. "You how? Why are you in the sheriff's private office?" Deputy Mark closed the laptop, looking at the ceiling like he was about to ask for a transfer. "Because your other husband," he said, nodding at the blonde man, "just confessed to something that affects all of you." The sheriff folded his arms. "And we're not leaving this room until it's all out." Karen swayed. Ralph muttered something about annulments, and I just stood there trying to keep up. "Other husband," I whispered, staring at Karen. "What the hell, Karen?" The blonde guy looked around, then fixed his eyes on the envelope. "This all started because of that envelope," he said, voice soft, regretful. For a second, nobody breathed. Karen looked like she'd aged a decade in a minute. Ralph looked like he wanted to crawl under a desk. The sheriff just looked tired. Sheriff Daniels leaned in. "Start talking." The blonde man nodded at Karen, then tapped the envelope still clutched in her hand. "What's inside that envelope isn't just paperwork, it's evidence. Enough to tie the entire neighborhood improvement committee to a string of illegal transactions." Ralph made a sound like a squeak toy. "Organization." "You mean the HOA?" Karen snapped. "It's not an organization, Ralph, it's a committee. A neighborhood beautification committee." The sheriff rolled his eyes so hard I thought they might stick. "Karen, the only thing your committee's improved is my blood pressure." Deputy Mark chimed in, eyes narrowed. "You've been laundering money through fake lawn care invoices for months, and your friend here," he nodded at the blonde man, "finally got tired of carrying the whole operation." Karen spun on husband number 2, eyes blazing. "You told them you promised you wouldn't say a word until I was ready." "Karen," he said, voice calm but tired, "you broke into someone's house tonight. This was already out of your hands." I raised my hand like some confused kid in homeroom. "Okay, wait, what does any of this have to do with me? or why the sheriff left the envelope with me. Sheriff Daniels turned, and for the first time that night I saw something like compassion in his eyes. Because you're the only person in the neighborhood who wasn't involved, bought off, or scared into silence. You were the safest person to hold it until the state investigator arrived tomorrow. I blinked, feeling like I'd been dragged into a play and forgotten my lines. So Karen broke in to steal it to protect her committee. Karen flung her hands up, desperate. It wasn't stealing, it was preventing misinterpretation. If the state sees those documents without context, the whole neighborhood could go down. Home values will tank property taxes. Husband number 2 cleared his throat. Karen, they already know. I gave my statement yesterday. Karen let out a strangled wail, collapsing into the nearest rocking chair. Ralph finally found his voice. So you have 2 husbands. You run a secret criminal HOA. And you dragged me into this because you said it was about a misplaced landscaping bill. Karen waved him off. Ralph, please, this is bigger than bushes. The sheriff rapped the desk, bringing us back to reality. All right, we're done here. Everyone's giving statements tonight. But before he could finish, a sudden heavy thud echoed from the back of the house, followed by a low, unfamiliar voice. Sheriff, we need to talk. Everybody froze. Even Karen, who never obeyed anybody, stopped dead. Footsteps approached slow and steady. A tall man stepped into the doorway, dressed in a dark windbreaker, a little badge on his chest that made everyone else in the room nervous. Sheriff Daniels, he said, voice steady as a rock. Agent Hale, I'm here for the Wilcox file. At the name Wilcox, Karen winced like she'd been slapped. The sheriff's eyebrows shot up. You weren't supposed to arrive until morning. Agent Hale shook his head. Plans changed. He nodded at the envelope Karen still clutched like a life raft. I'm assuming that's the evidence packet. Karen immediately hid it behind her back like a guilty child. It's all a misunderstanding, she blurted. There are nuances, subcommittees you have to understand. Ma'am Hale said, polite but cold, you have the right to remain silent, and I'd suggest you use it. Ralph let out a shaky breath. Husband number 2 just stared at his shoes like a man finally too tired to run. Sheriff Daniels stepped aside. They're all connected to the HOA laundering case. Karen's been running most of it. Her husbands helped cover for her. One gave us everything we needed. Karen stomped a flip-flop. You all act like this is a big conspiracy. It was just a beautification effort. Ralph muttered. Karen, they found $50,000 hidden in flowerbed donations. Exactly, Karen shouted. Beautification. Agent Hale gave the sheriff a look. You could tell these 2 had seen weirder. He turned to me. And you're the one who held the envelope. Yeah, I said, didn't expect it to turn into all this. Hale nodded. You did the right thing. Keeping it out of their hands meant the evidence couldn't be destroyed or altered. Karen's scoffed eyes read. I wasn't going to destroy it, I was going to annotate it. The sheriff sighed. Karen, that's still tampering. And then, because of course nothing about this night was normal, Karen finally broke. Big, messy, snotty tears, the kind that get caught in your throat, the kind you know she hadn't let herself cry in years. I was just trying to protect the neighborhood. Everyone expects me to keep it perfect. Husband number 2 put a hand on her shoulder. Karen, perfection isn't a crime, but laundering money definitely is. Agent Hale stepped forward and gently finally took the envelope from Karen's shaking hands. All right, time to go. As Karen, her 2 husbands, and Deputy Mark were escorted out, the sheriff turned to me with a tired half-smile. You know, he said, voice low, next time I need someone to watch evidence, I'm picking a locker. Couldn't argue with that. I just stood there, heart finally slowing, watching the mess of my midnight kitchen, dog fur, flashlights and all. And you know what? I never did get that sleep back. But if there's one thing I learned, it's this. In a small town, even the people you think you know best can still surprise you. Especially at midnight, especially when envelopes, HOAs, and secrets are involved. Sunrise. In our neighborhood never comes quietly. Especially not after a night like that. You'd think after cops haul away your HOA president and half the drama squad at 2 a.m., folks would want to sleep in, but you'd be wrong. By 7 o'clock, the gossip train was running full steam. Phones were buzzing. Someone claimed to have seen men in suits outside the sheriff's house before dawn, and before I'd even brewed my first cup of coffee, my neighbor Gladys was on the porch pretending she was out for her usual walk, but we both knew she was fishing for details. I didn't give her much. Honestly, I didn't have the energy. After a night like that, you start questioning every little thing, your locks, your neighbors, even your own sanity. Luna, for her part, just wanted breakfast and a nap in the sun, blissfully unaware that her late-night growl might have just unraveled one of the biggest scandals our neighborhood ever saw. But the truth, That was the strangest part because as much as I wanted to go back to normal, there wasn't any normal left. Not after state agents cart your HOA president away in tears. Not after you find out half your neighbors were quietly funneling money for landscaping improvements that somehow ended up paying for lakefront vacations and designer handbags. Not after you realize the only reason you weren't part of it was dumb luck and the fact that nobody ever invites you to those committee meetings. And the fallout, well, let me tell you, it wasn't pretty. That morning you could feel the tension thick as that old July humidity. Folks who never made eye contact before were suddenly stopping at mailboxes, checking in on each other, tossing loaded questions like horseshoes. I stepped outside just in time to see Ralph, the real Ralph, newly single and free, shuffling out of his house with a duffel bag, eyes red and shoulders slumped. I thought about calling out, offering a word, but what do you say to a guy who just found out his wife had a second husband and a money-laundering side hustle? So I just gave him a wave, and he nodded back a little too grateful, a little too lost. You could almost feel the relief radiate off him, mixed with something else, shame maybe, or just plain confusion. All I could think was, man, there's a lot more behind these picket fences than I ever wanted to know. By noon, the news had spread. I got a call from my cousin across town asking if I'd heard anything about Karen. The local Facebook group exploded, rumors flying so fast you'd think our block had become ground zero for some reality TV pilot. Somebody posted a photo of the sheriff's truck outside Karen's house, and within an hour folks were arguing over whether the HOA would be dissolved, if home values would tank, if someone needed to start a neighborhood watch for real this time. Let me back up a sec. I know it sounds funny now, but I'll admit I felt a weird guilty relief. For years, Karen's been the one holding everyone to the rules, the mailbox colors, the weed heights, the length of your grass after a rainstorm. I once got a note about leaving my trash can out visible from the street for more than 20 minutes after pickup. She'd even timed it on her phone. Now, all those folks who'd nodded and smiled at the HOA meetings were suddenly acting like they'd never known her at all. But it wasn't just Karen on the chopping block. Deputy Mark was suspended by noon. The rumor was he'd tried to cover up the money trail, but the sheriff and Agent Hale were 2 steps ahead. Mark's wife, a substitute teacher, packed up the kids and left before sundown, didn't even look back. The sheriff's office put out a short statement. Ongoing investigation, more details to follow. Which in small-town code means we have no idea how deep this goes, so don't ask. What about Karen's other husband, the blonde one? That was the question on everyone's lips. His real name turned out to be Brian Sims. Apparently he'd met Karen at some property developer seminar in Dallas a few years back. She kept it secret, said he traveled a lot for work and only used him for the big deals. Turns out Brian was the guy making all the shell companies look legit, forged landscaping invoices, ghost employees, the whole 9 yards. When the state agent pressed him, Brian folded like a lawn chair, gave them the entire paper trail in exchange for immunity. You ever see a community unravel in slow motion? That's what it felt like. One by one, little secrets started leaking out. Who'd gotten kickbacks for approving unnecessary paving projects, who'd accepted gifts from the landscaping company, who'd written off new pool furniture as storm damage repairs. Even the local garden club got swept up. Apparently those anonymous donations for petunias paid for a high-end espresso machine in the clubhouse. Meanwhile, the state agents rolled in boxy rental cars and all knocking on doors with little notebooks and hard faces. They interviewed me twice. Once about the envelope, how I got it, who told me to keep it safe. Second time about Karen. Did I ever notice anything suspicious? Did I see anyone coming or going late at night? I told the truth, I didn't, but I wish I'd paid more attention. Looking back, there were plenty of odd moments. Karen texting late at night, surprise yard inspections right before HOA audits, invoices that never seemed to match what you saw on the street. But when you trust people to run things for you, you don't look too close. Guess we all learned something there. The funny thing is, even after all that, I kept thinking about Luna, my old dog who probably saved half the town with one bark. I bought her the biggest steak I could find that day. She ate it in 3 bites and spent the rest of the afternoon snoozing in the sun, not a care in the world. But for the rest of us, there was plenty to care about. The state put the HOA into receivership, appointed a temporary manager who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. The mailbox, rules, gone. The landscaping fines, suspended. Suddenly, the neighborhood felt like it could breathe again, even as folks eyed each other warily, wondering who'd be next. Sheriff Daniels stopped by later that week. He looked tired, maybe a little relieved. You did the right thing, he told me. even if it didn't feel like it. I laughed, told him I never wanted to see another manila envelope for as long as I lived. He grinned, said, "Next time I need evidence held, I'm picking a bank vault." We sat on my porch for a while, watching the sun dip behind the houses. He told me a few stories from his early days. Small-town cops, bigger messes, but never anything quite like this. It's always the folks you least expect. He said the ones who look like they've got everything under control. I nodded. Guess the whole HOA thing is about control, isn't it? He shook his head. Yeah. And when folks start thinking they're above the rules or that the rules are only for everyone else, that's when it all falls apart. I asked about Karen. He shrugged, said she'd probably get house arrest if she cooperated, maybe some fines. Brian would walk immunity deal. Ralph, well, he was just along for the ride, the sheriff said, but he'll never hear the end of it. I thought about that, about how easy it is to get swept up in someone else's storm. Later that night, I walked Luna around the block. The air felt different, lighter somehow, as if everyone was waiting for permission to relax. Kids played in yards that used to be out of bounds after sundown. Someone was grilling music drifting across fences that had once been measured to the inch. You know what I mean? Life moves on even when you think it can't. There's always another day, another sunrise, another chance to make things right, or at least a little better than before. And sometimes it's the smallest things, a locked door, a loyal dog, a sheriff with a stubborn streak, that end up changing everything. I'd like to say things went back to normal after that, but the truth is our little neighborhood never quite fit the old mold again. And honestly, maybe that's not such a bad thing. If you're reading this wondering what happened to Karen, she moved out a month later, packed up in the middle of the night, left a note for Ralph, and disappeared. Last I heard, she was living with a cousin 2 towns over working at a real estate office. There are rumors she joined another HOA. Some people never learn. The HOA dissolved quietly that fall. No more monthly meetings, no more anonymous complaint forms. The mailbox colors faded, grass grew wild in a few places, and the world didn't end. Funny how you spend so long worrying about rules, then when they're gone, all you feel is relief. Ralph got a rescue dog, named him Lucky. I see them sometimes at the park, both of them a little banged up, a little wiser, a lot happier. We nod, we laugh about the old days, and sometimes, just sometimes, we remember to lock the back door at night. If there's a lesson here, it's probably this. People can surprise you for better or worse. Trust your dog. Trust your gut. And if you ever get handed an envelope by the sheriff, don't ask questions. Just keep it safe. You never know whose story you'll end up in. Yeah, that happened. A few weeks after the scandal, you'd hardly recognize our street. It's funny, for all those years with Karen at the helm, you'd have thought the place would fall apart without her, that weeds would swallow driveways and fences would cave in, dogs running wild and neighbors at each other's throats. But what actually happened was quieter, stranger, maybe even a little better. There was this one afternoon not long after everything blew up, when I was sitting on my porch with Luna just watching the world go by. Kids zipped up and down the sidewalk on scooters, their laughter echoing down the block, unbothered by HOA rules about quiet hours. Gladys from 2 doors over, who used to glare at anybody who stepped on her grass, was now the unofficial neighborhood baker. Every other day, she brought out a tray of cookies, waving folks over for a bite. She even started letting her grandkids paint rocks for her flower beds, purple-green, even one with a wobbly smiley face. The old Karen would have thrown a fit, but Gladys just smiled and said, "Life's too short to worry about the color of a rock." It wasn't all smooth sailing, though. There were meetings at the library, not official HOA meetings, just gatherings. Folks sharing stories, hashing out new ways to keep up the common spaces without rules and fines. It took some getting used to not having someone ready to ticket you for your trash cans or hedge height, but people figured it out. Turns out, when you trust folks to take care of their own space, most of them do a pretty good job. The temporary manager sent by the state was named Evelyn, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with a gray ponytail and the patience of a saint. She didn't care about mailbox paint or how many gnomes you put in your yard. All she wanted was to make sure the bills got paid, the grass got mowed, and nobody set anything on fire. She had a way of calming folks down even during the roughest arguments. If you've got a beef, she'd say, "Bring me cookies, not complaints." Funny thing, people started getting along better without all those rules. The Feenies, who never used to wave, started hosting Sunday barbecues. Kids helped old Mr. Jacoby plant tomatoes, first time he'd let anyone touch his garden in decades. Folks who'd never spoken outside HOA meetings now swapped recipes, shared tools, even watched each other's pets when someone left town. There was a kind of peace and ease that settled over us, like we'd all let out a breath we didn't know we'd been holding. But not everybody adapted so quickly. You could see it in the way some people clung to the old ways, peeking through blinds, snapping pictures when someone's grass got a little too long, whispering about declining standards. But without Karen to back them up, their complaints fizzled out. Nobody came to measure fence heights. The mailbox committee vanished overnight. I ran into Sheriff Daniels a couple times at the hardware store. He always looked a little less burdened, like he'd finally put down a weight he'd been carrying for years. He joked that he missed the steady stream of HOA calls. At least those gave me an excuse to get out of the office, he said. One morning we grabbed coffee together. He told me about the last stages of the investigation. Most folks cut deals, paid some fines, agreed to community service, promised not to touch another HOA checkbook as long as they lived. Karen, well, turns out she was tougher than people thought. She pled her case, told the court she was just trying to keep the community strong, but the evidence was what it was. The judge gave her probation, some restitution, a ban from serving on any board for 10 years. Rumor was she took up teaching Pilates at the Y. I can't confirm it, but I like the image of Karen in spandex shouting about form instead of fences. Brian, the other husband, took off after the trial. Some say he's in Florida, flipping condos. Poor Ralph spent a while trying to figure out who he was without Karen running his life. Eventually, he seemed to find his footing. He started showing up to neighborhood get-togethers, bringing homemade chili or just a big smile. He laughed easier, moved lighter. Sometimes, when he thought no one was looking, you'd catch him talking to Lucky, his new rescue dog, like they were the only two souls in the world who understood each other. Maybe they were. One Saturday, Evelyn called a block party not to vote on rules, but just to celebrate making it through. There was a bouncy castle, pulled pork sandwiches, homemade lemonade. Somebody set up a cornhole game. I caught Gladys teaching a bunch of kids to play hopscotch. She claimed she hadn't skipped since 1957, but she still had the moves. Even the sheriff showed up, badge off, hat in hand, tossing horseshoes with the best of us. We gathered around as the sun dipped low. Someone started up a fire pit, and people told stories about the old HOA days, about Karen's endless notes, about the time Ralph tried to trim his hedges with a chainsaw and nearly took out the cable line. We laughed so hard I had tears in my eyes, the kind you get when you realize how far you've come. It struck me then how much this neighborhood had changed, not just in the rules, but in the way we saw each other. Without Karen's shadow looming, folks let themselves be real messy, imperfect human. I thought about Luna curled up at my feet, snoring softly. She'd brought us together in her own way, a simple warning bark that kicked off a storm and when it cleared, left us with clearer skies. Sometimes people ask if I'd want to go back to the way things were, all neat lawns and painted mailboxes, rules for every inch. I always tell them the same thing. It's better now. Messier, sure. Unpredictable. But real. There's a freedom in not worrying so much about what's proper and just living your life, sharing it with folks who'll show up for you, not because they have to, but because they want to. You know what I mean? There's a certain peace in that. The kind you only find after the storm, when the world feels fresh again, even if your grass is a little wild and your mailbox leans just a bit to the left. The old neighborhood improvement committee sign is still in the clubhouse, half covered by a faded quilt someone's grandma left behind. Nobody has the heart to take it down. It's a reminder, I guess, of where we've been and how easy it is to lose sight of what really matters. But now when I walk by, I see more than just rules and fines. I see kids playing neighbors, laughing, and Luna chasing butterflies. And I know in the end we found something better than perfect. So next time someone tells you a little chaos is the end of the world, remember our street. Sometimes a little mess is exactly what you need. And if you ever hear your dog growling at midnight, trust her. You never know what she's trying to tell you. The months rolled by, and our neighborhood settled into its new skin, a patchwork of fresh beginnings and stubborn habits. But every so often something would spark up the old feelings, and you'd remember how close we all came to losing our little community, to secrets, pettiness, and greed. Sometimes it was a silly thing like a broken swing at the playground, or a lost dog poster tacked to the old committee board, or the hum of laughter drifting from Gladys's porch. Other times it was deeper, like the day the last of the official HOA papers were boxed up and sent off to storage, ending an era nobody wanted to admit they'd ever needed. I remember one chilly October morning raking leaves in the front yard when Ralph stopped by with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. He'd grown a beard, started wearing old ball caps with faded logos, and he seemed lighter somehow. Not the hunched, worried man who once lived in Karen's shadow. Lucky his rescue mutt bounded over and tried to help with the leaves, scattering them everywhere, and we just stood there watching the mess, laughing till our sides hurt. "You know," Ralph said, handing me a mug, "if Karen could see this now, she'd file a violation report so fast your head would spin." We both cracked up, and for a moment it didn't matter what had come before. All that mattered was the simple comfort of standing in the sunlight, 2 neighbors with nothing left to hide. Around Thanksgiving, Evelyn, still the temporary manager. Though at this point manager meant someone who kept a group text going and made sure the water bill got paid, organized a potluck in the park. Folks brought all kinds of food, from Gladys's famous pecan pie to Mr. Jacoby's suspiciously spicy chili. Brian, the infamous other husband, sent a postcard from Florida alligators in Santa. Had a quick scribble about starting over and wishing everyone less drama this year. Someone read it aloud and we all raised our cups, not quite forgiving but not holding grudges either. As the night cooled, stories warmed. People shared little bits of themselves, things nobody ever knew back when the HOA was king. Turned out Mr. Feeney had been a jazz drummer in Chicago. Gladys admitted she'd been divorced 3 times and still believed in love. Evelyn confessed she'd once wanted to be a park ranger, but ended up in property management because someone's got to keep the lights on. Every story landed with a laugh or a sigh, and when someone started a chorus of "Take Me Home, Country Roads," everyone joined in, off-key and beaming. Not every day was easy, of course. The first time the grass got knee-high on one property, tempers flared, old instincts die hard. But instead of writing a complaint, Mrs. Mackenzie grabbed her grandson's mower and offered to help. A week later, there was a lawn mowers and lemonade club, unofficial, unpaid, just a way to get folks outside and talking. Even the teenagers joined in, some for the free soda, some for the pocket money, but all of them a little less glued to their phones. The old clubhouse, once home to Karen's endless compliance meetings, became a real community space. We set up movie nights, folding chairs and popcorn under the stars. There were craft fairs, book swaps, even a weird pet look-alike contest that Luna and I lost, though she did get a ribbon for most expressive ears. It felt like we were finally living in a place that belonged to all of us, not just the loudest or the strictest. There were quieter moments too, the kind that sneak up on you in the middle of the night. Sometimes I'd catch myself double-checking the locks, listening for the kind of trouble that starts with a whisper and a soft click. But Luna would nudge my hand, look at me with those steady old eyes, and I'd remember we'd already made it through the worst. Whatever else came, we could handle it together. It wasn't long before word got around town, not about the scandal, but about the comeback. Folks from nearby neighborhoods came by to ask how we'd done it, how we kept things running without rules and fines. Evelyn always told them the same thing: trust people to care, and most of the time they will. Some didn't believe it. Others stayed, joined a cookout, maybe started dreaming about what their own streets could be. Once in a while, someone would ask about Karen. Where was she? Would she ever come back? The answer changed, depending on who you talked to. Some said she was running a condo board in Arizona, others that she'd gone off the grid. But the truth, or at least the rumor I believed, was simpler. She was learning to live small, to let go, maybe even to forgive herself. I like to think she found peace in her own way, just like we did. Years passed. The trees grew taller, fences faded, but the laughter and the easy kindness remained. New families moved in, drawn by the rumors of a place that felt like home. Old-timers stayed not because they had to, but because they wanted to see what would happen next. And me, well, I kept writing. Stories about second chances, about neighbors who became friends, about the courage it takes to change not just the rules, but your own heart. Sometimes I'd sit on the porch as dusk settled, Luna at my feet, and watch the streetlights flicker on. I'd think about that night, the envelope, the chaos, the chance we all took on each other. Would I go back and change anything? Maybe. Maybe not. Because as much as it hurt, the fear, the betrayal, the mess, it brought us here. It made us real. And if that's not worth everything, I don't know what is. So, if you ever find yourself tangled up in secrets and old grudges, if you ever wonder whether people can really change, take it from me. Trust the good in folks. Give them space to grow. Let your grass get a little wild. And never underestimate the power of a loyal dog and a nosy neighbor. Because sometimes the thing you thought would break you is just the thing that sets you free.